Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox. Welcome back for another episode. You're in for a treat today because I'm in for a treat today. And the reason we're both in for a treat today is I have Conor McAnally. And belying his accent, he's a fellow Texan. So always great to have a fellow Texan. Conor, with that incredibly long winded introduction, first of all, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
We're here to talk about your most recent book, Bullets in the Water, but we're going to take a little bit of a deep dive because you have a fascinating background. So, can you sort of run us through what got you to Austin?
Okay. Well, like most things, and like most people who relocate somewhere, what got me to Austin was true love. I'm married to a woman called Kay Garcia from Austin, and there's nothing more magnetic than going to the place your true love comes from. So when we got together first, well, a long, long time ago, well over 30 years ago now, we lived in London in the UK, although I'm originally from Ireland. We lived in London for 17 years, and then we went back to Austin together. It happened to coincide with a time when the company I was working for sold a major music TV project that I had helped create to a company in Los Angeles. And so I went over to produce this music series for DirecTV, and coincided it was us buying a beautiful antebellum home in Bastrop, Texas. And so I'm not Texan by birth, but I guess I'm Texan by choice.
Good enough for me. Our audience probably doesn't know, but you were one of the very first VJs in Ireland. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Way back in the early 80s, I was working with an independent production company I'd created, and music television in the States had just started. MTV had just started. And I was a producer at that time. And I joined up with a guy called Vincent Hanley, who was a disc jockey. And we co-created a company called Green Apple Productions, Green for Ireland, Apple, the Big Apple for New York. And we shot a series of 3-hour shows where we showed music videos. We were the first people in Europe to do a terrestrial TV music video show, which ran for 3 hours on a Sunday afternoon in Ireland, and pretty much totally changed the landscape of young people's programming at the time, because there was nothing for them. On Sunday afternoons, there was Gaelic sports on one of the Irish channels, the national channel RTE had Gaelic sports all afternoon. And then on their second channel, they had very, very bad, kind of awkward, lowbrow stuff on there, but nothing for kids at all. And we managed to create this 3-hour show. And it was the first time, for example, video graphics were used in Ireland, the first time digital effects were used in Ireland, the first time there were sort of music jingles in and out of commercial breaks. So it was a fairly big revolutionary thing. And as I say, kind of changed the entertainment landscape for young people in Ireland. It kind of became a bit of a phenomenon at the time. Vincent did most of the VJ work. He was the New York guy, and I did the Irish end of it as a presenter, because I had been a presenter, but I was also the producer and executive producer of the show as well.
So, in preparing for this podcast about your book, Bullets in the Water, uh, uh, I might even say you were born to write this book. But if that's not true, it would certainly seem to have sprung from a lifetime of the work you've been in. Could you tell us the inspiration behind the book?
Sure. The inspiration really came out of a murder that happened about a mile and a half away from my house in Bastrop in 2016. And it was a poor lady called Jessica Brown, who was delivering newspapers at about 4:30 in the morning, driving along and tossing them on people's driveways. And a couple of hours later, her car was found and it had run off the road into some trees. And initially people thought, you know, she'd had a heart attack or something like that. But when the police arrived, they discovered she'd been shot. And to this day, nobody has been accused of that crime. Nobody has been caught for it at all. And the whole idea of somebody as innocent as a person delivering newspapers being shot for no apparent reason just fascinated me and just stayed with me. So that was one of the things I kind of was like, what happened there? Why did it happen? How did it happen? What could it be? And that sort of set my imagination running riot at the time. And there was a second murder fairly close to us about a year earlier than that, of a lady in there was this strip mall that had never opened, and it had been there in pristine condition for about 10 years, and nobody in it. And the thought always was it was a bit of a tax dodge. Now, whether it was or not, I don't know, but it was just a very odd thing. And this poor lady was shot dead by two contract killers in the car park of this strip mall. And again, that's something that just sat in my brain, is like, you know, contract killers, you know, really, what's going on there? And in this kind of abandoned, well, not even an abandoned strip mall, a strip mall that never opened. It was just always in pristine condition. So those were the two things that kind of sat in my brain together. And and sort of started my imagination sparking in a whole different direction. And I've kind of incorporated the essence of both of those into the story and speculated everything else that might have happened as a result of those things happening.
So let me, I love talking to writers about the craft of writing. So let me just dive into it. Does this play out in your head and you record it? Do you outline it? Did you have a direction you wanted to take it? Did the characters take you in a direction you weren't expecting? What was that like for you?
It was a combination of a lot of things, Tom. I am a bit of a planner. I'm not a pantser, right? So I kind of need a bit of a structure. I need to know I've got a beginning and middle and an end to a thing. But that said, and it surprised the daylights out of me, Mike Carson decided to do things as I was writing that I wasn't expecting. And that's kind of the weirdest thing, I think, as a writer. You're like, hang on a minute, this was not what I planned. But, you know, he took me down different roads that I did not expect. But broadly speaking, I tend to be somebody who likes to know where I'm going with the scene. And the way I write, I think, is based very largely on my television background. I visualize the scenes. I can see them in my head. I can see where the characters are, what they're doing, who they are, what they look like, you know, what the place looks like. And but I kind of draw a lot of that out of personal experience of stuff that I've seen here or there, and kind of bring it together, in this case, in the fictional town of Taborville, Texas.
You mentioned the character, Mike Carson.
Mike Carson. Yeah.
First of all, could you tell the audience who Mike Carson is and how much of Conor is in Mike?
Mike Carson is the investigative journalist that I wish I had been courageous enough to be on one level. I'm glad I didn't have his alcohol problem. But he incorporates some of the things that I wish as an investigative journalist, because that's how I started my career as a journalist and as an investigative journalist with independent newspapers, one of the national newspapers here in Ireland. And, you know, I took risks in the same way that he takes risks. You know, I was investigating, for example, I was a journalist during the Irish Troubles, and I was investigating the bombing of Dublin at one particular point. And we had just about started to figure out how British intelligence, the MI6, were involved in it when my death notice was read into the paper at 2 o'clock in the morning, at a time when it happened to be, the desk happened to be manned by my investigative journalist colleague who was working on the story with me. And that scared the daylights out of the editor, and we never got to finish that story, sadly. But we had a lot of others that we did. And so there's definitely the process that Mike goes through is very much the process I, as an investigative reporter, went through. What I didn't do, and what Mike does, and I admire Mike for, is Mike lived the part. So, for example, if you wanted to do a piece on, say, homelessness, he lived as a homeless person for a couple of weeks. I'm not sure I had the stones to do that.
So why, maybe you've answered this earlier, but I'm intrigued by your selection of a small town as opposed to perhaps a city like the one you grew up in.
Well, interestingly enough, I think I've always been fascinated by small towns. And, you know, Dublin, while it's a fairly big city, essentially was a series of small towns that kind of got linked together geographically. So each kind of area had its own little dynamic. But Ireland is full of small towns. And, you know, throughout my kind of early career as a journalist, I became very familiar with all the small towns in Ireland and the politics of those, and the dynamic and the power base of them. Like in Ireland at the time I was growing up, the power base in a small Irish town was the Catholic priest, the police sergeant, the school teacher, and the librarian, pretty much, and maybe the doctor. And that was kind of where the power base was. And on local councils, you know, there was the equivalent of a good old boy network. It was, you know, who did you know on the city council if you wanted to get stuff done? So that process kind of has always fascinated me. That sort of, you know, very small level of kind of corruption, but, you know, stuff that gets done because you know somebody. And I found when I moved to Texas, I found small town Texas because we were living in a small town like Bastrop at the time, I think just less than 8,000 people. The dynamics in lots of ways are very similar to small Irish towns. The way it happens is different, you know, and the falling out of people is a bit different. Like in Ireland at the time I was growing up, if there was a dispute over something, the worst thing that might happen is somebody might get a smack in the face outside the pub on a Saturday night. Nobody gets shot dead. But, and you know, that was different. But the basics of it are pretty much the same.
What did you enjoy the most about writing this, sort of letting your imagination go, trying to solve the mysteries, or something else?
The bit I enjoyed most, I think, was trying to get a lot of complexity into it and have multiple layers of storytelling going on at the same time. And so I really wanted to try to capture what a small town Texas was like, in terms of lived experience on the one hand. I also wanted to chart a story of redemption for the main character, who starts off having, you know, this is not a big spoiler, but like Mike has returned to his small town in Texas, his hometown in Texas, to sell his uncle's house. Mainly because he just got fired from a national newspaper in New York. And largely because he's having a major struggle with alcohol, and he's in a very bad place. So by being asked, kind of almost accidentally and certainly very reluctantly, to investigate a local murder, the murder of a newspaper delivering person, he gets dragged into trying to solve that murder. And the further he goes, the more questions he asks, the worse things get for him, and the more complicated things become, and more and more and more layers of stuff come out that kind of make you think, well, what's really going on here? Is it, is it this? Is it that? Suddenly there's all sorts of things going on that you didn't expect, and it gets quite complicated. So trying to kind of get all those storylines working together, and also get a sense of what the town looks and feels like, and kind of tastes like and behaves like. It's a character in the book as well.
Is the bastrop of 2025 the same bastrop that's the character in the book?
Not a bit of it. Not a bit of it. Sadly, I don't think so. It has grown exponentially and has become, a sort of sleeper town in a way for Austin, unfortunately. Like when I moved to Bastrop originally, there was one traffic light in the 35 miles between the airport at Bergstrom in Austin and the town of Bastrop. There was one traffic light, and there was no traffic lights in Bastrop at all. There was one sort of blinking red on a four-way in the middle of the town, and that was it. And like when I drove in there for the very first time, all of my Texas fantasies were like, wow, I can't believe this. So like you turn onto the main street and I'm like, oh my God, there's buildings from 1832. It looks just like a cowboy set. And like the very first picture of me as a kid, other than, the embarrassing baby photograph where you look ugly and fat, was me at the age of probably about 3, sitting on my horse, which was my tricycle, with my cowboy hat on and a rifle in one hand and a 6-gun in the other, ready to hunt down the bad guys. So like it was every bit of every fantasy I'd ever had as a kid to suddenly drive into this place. And at the time, it was small enough to have an amazing sense of community. And we had this, a really strong volunteer group, and, it was a vibey, buzzy place. It was sort of place, Tom, where, if you went into a restaurant, it was unusual for you not to know somebody there. And by the time, the sort of early 20s came around, it was unusual if you did know somebody. It kind of had changed to that degree, sadly.
Let me change the focus a little bit and ask
Sure.
you about working with Stoney Creek Publishing. And
Okay.
what was that experience like for you?
I have loved every bit of it. I have loved every bit of it. Lawrence Steffi, who's the managing director of it, is an amazing guy, and I have found him an absolute joy to work with. He's been incredibly supportive right from the get-go, believed in the book, believed in the story, and we negotiated about contract, and that went back and forth, but in a very fair way, I think, from an author's point of view. Anything I had little questions about, there was no sense of this is the deal, take it or leave it. Everything was open to a bit of negotiation. And then, I'm delighted with the actual quality of the book itself that's come out, the print quality. It's a lovely piece of work. I really like it. And that's always, you're always worried about that. Like, what's it going to come out like? Will it be okay? Will it be nice? Will it feel good? And it did. It felt lovely. And Leslie Barrett, who handles publicity there and promotions, fabulous lady. So I met, we had a meeting earlier on in the year, and we sat down and talked through strategy and whatever. And they're just lovely people to work with. And kind of you're in safe hands. You have that sense that these are people of their word. They're going to do what they say they're going to do. And that's incredibly comforting, especially for somebody who spent quite a bit of time in Hollywood, where nobody tells you what's going on and nobody has any intention of doing what they say they're going to do.
Let me change focus back to you and Mike a little bit. Will we see Mike in another book?
Mike is already having another adventure in a book called Bullet for a Friend that's in its first draft at the moment. So yeah, Mike definitely is coming back. And the stakes are going to be even higher for the poor lad this time. So he's embarking on some strange stuff. Lots of very nationally bad things are going to happen to the poor fella.
Is he still in Texas?
No, he's not in Texas. He will be. There'll be Texas partly in it, but he had a decision to make, and he's not in Texas for the start of this book, certainly.
Well, Conor, unfortunately, we're near the end of our time for this episode. But before we leave, I wanted to ask you if our listeners wanted to connect with you on any of your social media platforms, what might be the best place for them to do so?
Best place for me is my website's conormac.com, CONORMAC.com. I'm on Facebook as Conor McAnally. I'm on Instagram as Conor Mac Author. And my email's connor@conormac.com. So if anybody wants to give me a shout, I'm more than happy to talk to them. Go on ahead.
We're gonna link to your book in the show notes, both on Stoney Creek Publishing and on Amazon. I wanted to anything else you wanted to add?
Well, just the other place you can get it is tamupress.com. The Texas A&M publishing company that the Stoney Creek are part of. So you can get it there. You can also get it on BN, Barnes & Noble, bn.com. So it's available in all of those places and should be available in local bookstores too. And just to say thank you and all the wonderful work you do on the podcast. Thank you so much. It's been a great privilege to be here.
Well, thank you very much. I really enjoy this podcast. I love talking to other writers. So hopefully we'll be talking again.
Please, God. Thank you so much.